Hi, welcome to my channel. If you're new, welcome back if you're a subscriber. Today I have a video that I've been really excited to make for a really long time, and I've been compiling my list. I keep rearranging things, I keep debating things in my head, and I said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna break it up into 2 videos. That way there's a little less pressure. And so this video today is sharing my all-time favorite horror books. And so I'm dividing this up into 2 parts, and in each of the parts there's going to be multiple different kinds of horror in it. Instead of putting, you know, all my isolated horror recommendations in the first video or all my Gothic recommendations in the second video, I've kind of mixed them up. So if there are books that you know I've raved about for a really long time, don't worry, they're in one of these videos. I just wanted to break it up into multiple videos. So for me personally, when books become my favorites, it's usually because of the specific feeling they give me while I'm reading and also after I read the book. Whether it's immersing me in an atmosphere that I really enjoy, whether it's disturbing me, traumatizing me, or emotionally impacting me, shocking me, if a book leaves me wanting to share my experience with others, talk about the ending, debate things, I love books like that. If a book ends and I'm just dying to discuss it with other people who've read it already, this is a sign that it's probably gonna make it into one of my favorites of all time. So like I said, this list, it's always cycling through different ones. Things get shifted and bumped around, but right now, this is my list of some of my favorite horror books of all time. Also, as I go through and recommend these books, I'm going to give them some labeling words. That way you kind of know what category they fall into and what vibes to expect when picking it up. So without further ado, let's get into the first book of this video, and it is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This book, I am so obsessed with this book. It's definitely one of my favorite books I've read this year. And this one, if I had to describe it with some words, it would be Gothic, slow burn, atmospheric. This one is so atmospheric. The atmosphere in this is one of my favorite atmospheres I've ever read in any book. If you're expecting a really fast-paced plot or to be on the edge of your seat, you're not really gonna get that with this one. This one is about feeling like you're in the world, being immersed in it, and I was so immersed in this. I felt like I was literally there right alongside the main character. So this one is about a woman who's living in the South, and this is in a world that's kind of similar to our own, but it's in a fantasy world. And she is living in the slums with her brother who treats her horribly, and she's desperate to get out of the situation she's in. So she has heard about blood maids who work for really wealthy people up in the north and sell their blood for the rich people to drink. And they are set up for life. They get fed, they get room, they get board. They don't have to worry about anything for the rest of their life in exchange for this. So the main character applies to be a blood maid. She's accepted and she goes to this House of Hunger, and she works for this countess. And so you're following her experience working as a blood maid, interacting with other blood maids, and also seeing how these wealthy people act. There's a huge class difference between the wealthy and the poor, and she's living in the castle and learning what it is to be a blood maid, and she sort of sparks a relationship with the countess. Also, it's very suspenseful at the end. The end was so impactful. Oh my gosh, I just wish I could experience this all over again. It's honestly not as long as I think it should be. I would have preferred that this was longer, and I want to experience other books in this world because you only get to see the House of Hunger, not the other houses. The next book is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by LaRocca, and this book is so good. I feel like I'm just gonna be a broken record saying this over and over and over. I actually have only read this book. It was republished, and it's this book with another short story. I've not read that other story, but I have read the main story, and it was originally published just with the main story. This one, if I had to describe it, would be a very fast read, mixed media, and disturbing. So this one, I want to tell you so very little going into it. All you have to know is it's about 2 women in the early 2000s communicating online on a message forum and emailing each other, and one of them is selling an apple peeler, and then they start communicating and things turn dark very fast. This book is really disturbing. There are some things in this that have stuck with me to this day. As I was reading it, I was totally sucked in. I was just flipping the pages so fast. I had to know what was gonna happen. And things were just really shocking in this book. I don't really want to say too much. This, I think, is sort of extreme horror. It's not as extreme as a lot of extreme horror, but it's definitely more on the extreme side. So be warned if that's not something you usually read, to maybe look up trigger warnings. This one, it is a wild ride. I had to immediately go talk about the ending, and it's slightly ambiguous, so you can walk away with different interpretations of the ending, which is kind of interesting. I also just really love books when they're in different formats. So when you're reading emails and messages and stuff like that, I just find it to be really fast-paced and engaging and just a fun change. The next one is The Patient by Jasper Dewitt, and this one I read a few years ago, and I really, really love this one. If I had to describe it, I would say it's really scary, it's psychological, and it has unique formatting. So like I said before, I really love books and am drawn to books with unique formatting, and this one is told from a psychiatrist who worked at a mental hospital, and he's sharing his experience working with this very, very troubled and scary patient on this forum made for other doctors to read. And when he went to this asylum, he heard about this patient who had been there since he was 6 years old. He was very, very troubled and no one could help him. And everybody who had worked with him had basically been driven to madness or suicide. But this doctor was like, hey, I'll be the one to fix him, which never works. So he shares his experience working with this patient. Like I said, it's psychological, but there's also some supernatural elements in here, which made it really interesting. And this one has an ambiguous ending as well. And I highly recommend it. It's really good. It's a short read, and I feel like more people need to read this one. And it's truly scary. It's one of the only books that has actually made me feel scared. The next one I'm going to recommend is definitely extreme horror, and I want to recommend it with caution because you should look up trigger warnings if you have triggers, because this definitely goes to a very dark place. This one is my most recent read on the list, and it is Gone to See the Riverman by Kristopher Triana. And wow, I've been hearing about this book for a while and wanting to read it, but I had been kind of putting it off, and I finally picked it up and I was blown away. This book is a lot. It is a lot. And it deals with some taboo things, so just prepare yourself that it's maybe not what you think it's going to be. People were saying, you know, that it's very disturbing, and I was assuming it was disturbing in a different way than it ended up being disturbing. Let's get into what it's about. This one is about Lori, and she is obsessed with this serial killer who has murdered many, many women, and she has been communicating with him through letters. She actually goes in and literally visits him and brings him things and talks with him. They kind of have this relationship going on. And one day he's talking with her and says he wants her to go to this cabin and get a key out of it, and the cabin's in the middle of the woods, and then go and give it to the riverman. And for some reason, she listens to him, she brings along her sister, and you're following her on this journey. But as she's going through the woods and going on this journey for this man, you are learning about her life, and you're learning about her past through letters that she's sent to this serial killer. And your view of this character just completely changes throughout the novel as you learn more and more about her and her past. So it is fascinating, it's dark, it's very impactful, and it's really well written. And also, I very much liked how it ended. And this is one of the best serial killer books I've ever read. Just know that this book is incredibly haunting and disturbing, and it will stick with you. At least it stuck with me, and I couldn't put this one down. If you're looking for something that's super action-packed, this is not going to be it. It's more a slow reveal about a character's past and why they are how they are. The way it ended was perfect for this story. The next book on this list is Penpal by Dathan Auerbach. And this one, if I needed to describe it in a few words, I would say very, very scary and realistic horror. This book feels like the most realistic horror story I have ever read, where it really feels like it could happen to someone. So if you're really scared by realistic horror, I would recommend this one. So this is about a man, and he's looking back into his childhood and remembering all these sort of mysterious unsolved events and trying to figure out what really was going on and piecing them together. And it's told in a unique way because it's not told in a linear way. You'll get chapters from when he's younger and then when he's in his teenage years and so on and so forth. So it was really interesting because you are piecing together, as the main character is piecing together, what really happened. And once it's finally revealed at the end, it is very disturbing. This book, you just feel this impending dread and doom the whole entire time. And there was a specific chapter, 2 to be specific, that really, I mean, more than 2, honestly, but One was called Boxes. I feel like everybody sort of references that one. Boxes was super creepy. Maps and screens that just really, really got to me. So it's almost like you're getting short stories within a big story, but there's an overarching theme. All right, my next book is totally changing gears. And if I had to describe it, it would be a fun, humorous, heartwarming, yet also gross ride. And that is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This one, obviously I'm just smiling. I love this book so much. Grady Hendrix honestly is such a unique author. I love his voice. I've really loved almost all of his books so much, but this one is to this day my favorite. I love this book. The title explains what it's about. It's about a group of housewives in the 90s who form this book club, and they kind of hide it from their husbands what they're actually reading. They say they're going to a Bible study, but really they're reading horror books and true crime. And one day this man comes into town, he's mysterious, and they start to suspect that he may be a vampire. And that's all you need to know. It's so good. There's some bug scenes in this that are so disgusting. Like, they have stuck with me for a very long time. This book is so good. I feel like I always talk about this book, so I could just rave forever about it, but read this book. It's amazing. Another big shift of gears is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this one, in the title, you can tell that the atmosphere is going to be Gothic. This is a slow burn historical novel, and this book has a very special place in my heart. I love it so much. This takes place in 1950s Mexico, and it is about a main character named Noemi, and she gets this letter from her cousin who has recently married this man, and the letter's really troubling and she wants to go check on her. So she goes and checks on her in her remote Gothic mansion, and she stays there for a little while, and she starts to suspect that it's haunted. And so you're following her story and her trying to figure out what's going on, how to help her cousin, and the atmosphere in this is just so good. This atmosphere is one of my favorite atmospheres I've ever read, and I really need to reread this one because it's been a while since I've read it. It's just such a good book. I love the main character, Noemi. She's such a strong female lead. She's amazing, and I love this book so much. It's so good. And this book, I actually recreated this book cover a few years ago, and it was so much fun. I took the tablecloth from Goodwill and made it look like a dress. I didn't sew it or anything, but I was able to like tie it up in a way that looked like a dress. I'll have to insert a picture up here, but I highly recommend this one if you want a Gothic feeling haunted house book. All right, next I want to talk about a creature feature in an isolated setting, and this one is The Shuddering by Ania Ahlborn. This one also feels really cinematic and like you're watching a movie, and it's very, very fast-paced. So this one's about a group of friends who are reuniting, and they're going to this cozy remote cabin, but something goes terribly wrong and a creature lurks outside. This one was one where in the beginning, I didn't really like the characters at all. And as I kept reading, I actually started caring about the characters and growing attached to them, which is kind of rare for me in books like this where people are getting picked off one by one. I generally am not that invested in the characters, but this one was so good. And it also has such tense scenes. There's a specific scene that I remember reading where I felt like I had to hold my breath. It was so tense and it was so well done. And this one I just was visualizing like a movie the whole entire time. I could totally see this translated to the big screen. It would be such a good movie adaptation. And the ending of this is really haunting. It's an Ania Ahlborn ending, all right. She has a specific way that she generally ends her books, at least the 3 that I've read, and it definitely does that in the end of this one. Next, I want to talk about A Headful of Ghosts by Paul Trembley. And this one I read a few years ago, but it still sticks with me as one of my favorite horror books I've read. This one has possession vibes, and it also has scenes in it from a TV show that's being made, so it has that cool element to it. But this one is about a family, and their daughter is showing signs of possession. And so the family takes her to doctors. They can't figure it out. No one can figure out how to help the daughter. So they finally ask a priest what to do, and he suggests performing an exorcism. But they also really, really need money, and so they contact this production company to come in and film the whole thing, which is absolutely wild. So like I said, I read this a while ago and I've read some more scary books since then. So I don't know if I read this now, if it would be as scary as it was to me back then. But this book really did scare me in certain scenes. You also hear the voice of a child and I thought it was done really well. It seemed like a really realistic child voice. And I thought the ending was very bleak, very haunting. So I suggest this one if you want a book that deals with the topic of possession and also documentary crews coming in and trying to figure out what's really going on, if somebody's actually possessed or if it's a medical condition. I would recommend this one if you are interested in seeing if someone is actually possessed or if it's something else going on and seeing the whole family dynamic dealing with a situation like this. This list would not be complete without a slasher. So the next book is Cirque Berserk by Jessica Guess. I would describe this one as retro slasher fun. It is such a fun ride. It also has a little bit of a twist, so there's a little more going on than just a typical slasher. And this one takes place at a carnival, which is such a fun atmosphere for a slasher. So in the summer in the 80s, there was actually a massacre that occurred at this carnival, and all the people involved have disappeared and it's since been shut down. And so 30 years later, there's a group of high school seniors, and so they want to see if this urban legend is actually true. So they decide to sneak into this amusement park, and obviously things don't go very well for them. Lastly, I have 2 YA book recommendations, and the first one has Scream vibes and it is so good. This one is called The Mary Shelley Club by Goldy Moldavsky, and if you love Scream and want something that'll make you feel like you're in a Scream movie, look no further. This book is for you. In this book, there's a club that plays elaborate horror movie style pranks on their friends and try to really freak them out. But someone starts to actually target their club and they all have to figure out how to survive a real killer. So this one is so much fun. I flew through it. And for me, sometimes I have a difficult relationship with YA books if they feel too young, but this one worked well for me. I mean, it felt like a YA book, but I still really enjoyed it. And I think a lot of people would still enjoy it even if they don't generally read YA. Also, the whole time I was imagining the main character as Sydney Prescott. I pictured her in my mind the whole time, so that probably added to some of the fun as well. Lastly, I have My Dearest, Darkest by Kayla Cottingham, and I feel like I talk about this book all the time. This has such good atmosphere. I would describe it as atmospheric. It has dark academic vibes and it's magical feeling, and that is everything I need in a book, honestly. So this is about a group of girls and they make a deal with this creature who lives under their campus who promises to grant them anything they want in exchange for body parts. So this one had some really amazing imagery in it. The whole time I felt like I was in this campus. The dark academia vibes were very strong. Oh, it was perfect. There's also a really sweet love story that happens in this, and I love this book so much. I still have so many more books to share with you that are my favorites, but those are my first batch of favorites. My next video will be coming out pretty soon. Let me know if any of your favorites were in this video, and if there's some books that I should check out that are not on this list. Again, they may be on the next list, but I'm always open for recommendations. And if you've made it this far, leave a ghost emoji, and I will talk to you all in my next video. Bye.